I'm going to play a clip from a concert, and you got to tell me which concert it is.
Yeah, this is called Test the Old Man.
Test the Old Man. This is our new series.
New segment on Q.
Let's go into the book a little bit. What was young Geddy like?
Well, that's a really interesting question, and because there was a perception of what young Geddy was like to me, and then after I wrote this book, I had a very different perception of what young Geddy was like.
What do you mean?
Because I always considered myself a shy, nerdy kid, kind of the quietest kid in the room. But when I look at some of the things I did throughout my early life, I couldn't have been that shy. I couldn't have been that reserved because, I ran off to join the circus. I joined this crazy rock band. And at one point, I got kicked out of that rock band. And then I started my own rock band like the next day.
Yeah.
These are not the actions of a quiet, nerdy kid.
You also grew your hair so long that your mom got someone to paint your bar mitzvah photo
Yes.
because she was so ashamed of you having long hair in it.
That's right. Yeah.
Like that's not a nerdy, quiet kid.
No, it's not. But I always thought of myself as such. And I was shy, that's for sure. And I think it's very common amongst entertainers. A lot of entertainers are shy. And one of the things that draws them to perform or create is to get over that shyness. So I think that was the case with me. But so it was very interesting to learn about myself through the eyes of this typing I was doing.
We don't just learn about you, though. I mean, really early on in the book, I want to say, I think it's chapter 3, you go into sort of after you establish your family and sort of like where you come from in Toronto, you go into great detail around your mother and your father's experience in the Holocaust. At a detail I was not expecting. I was so affected by it. The story of your mother and your father marrying in a camp. I had never heard a story like that before. Seeing the pictures of it. Well, first off, may I ask, what did you want us to get a sense of when writing that chapter?
When I agreed to do a memoir, when I finally admitted to myself and to my book agent that I would do a memoir, I said, it has to include a chapter about my mom's life during the war, about my family, like where they came from, what they went through, because you can't even hope to understand me if you don't know that. Because I think the environment that I was raised in, the home that I was raised in, the kind of stories that I was spoon-fed by my mom growing up were Holocaust stories. They were incredibly affecting, and they shaped, in one way or another, consciously or subconsciously, they shaped the person I have become. It's very interesting. When you hear these stories over and over again from a person who's aging, they change a little bit.
Right.
The facts start to get a bit fluid, shall we say. So I was determined to cross-reference every story I'd heard with other members of my family. And incredibly, I found resources that were synchronous with what I was trying to do. I found just an incredible amount of information that helped me finally tell my mom's story, for the sake of my family, if no one else, about what she really went through and what camps she was in and what she did to survive and how she met my dad and fell in love. And it's an incredible tale.
What do you mean when you say in order to understand me, you have to understand what my mom went through?
Well, my personality, my love of my culture, I quote my mom, I make great currency out of my mom's accent, for example. I love to talk like her and to tell the jokes she tells. Her story it set the tone for my life. Really, I think my sister and my brother would agree that we grew up in a household filled with evocative tales of danger and mystery and murder, and all those things seep into your blood and they form your value system and the way you regard the rest of the world. And so I really credit raising me. And then when my dad died, which was a watershed moment in
Yeah.
anyone's life when they lose a parent, but it was a very significant, powerful effect on me. And I don't think I would have been the musician I am, the person I am, had I not suffered those stories or suffered the loss of my dad. I really don't think I would have gone in this direction. Who knows where I would have ended up.
I want to stay on that in just a second about the growing up as the child of Holocaust survivors and how that might have impacted your life. But I want to go to what you just talked about just then, which is that you lost your dad when you were 12 years old. I was really struck by that you were you had a fever. Your dad seemed to have the same fever, like you had a flu and your dad had the same flu. And then one night you wake up and you describe it so powerfully, the idea that you were just lying in bed and you heard your mother shrieking and then you realize, hey, well, my dad is gone, but you're also in this sort of fevered daze. You don't really know what's going on. You're not able to do the things you're supposed to do. You said to me at the beginning, I said, what was young Geddy like? And you said, I've learned new things about what young Geddy was like from the writing of this book. Do you feel that way about the death of your father? Do you learn something new about the way your father died, the way you processed that death from writing about it?
Absolutely, I did. I didn't realize it when I set out to do it, but I sure feel like it now. And it was very cathartic for me, and it was very helpful in me creating a kind of grief work to get over Neil's passing. Because when you are suffering from grief, you're not just grieving for the person you just lost. You're grieving for everyone you've ever lost. It's connected in some profound, subconscious way.
Yeah.
So to understand myself better, if I'm going to go through the process, the rigor of writing a memoir, I want to get something out of it. And so I examined my father's death, and I realized that, I had a voice that wasn't being heard through that time, that my mother's grief was so powerful, was so overwhelming that it soaked up all the oxygen in the house. And us kids, my sister and myself, and my younger brother, who was, just 5, we were, collateral damage. Nobody asked us how we were handling it, not once, So that was important for me to know because it left unresolved feelings. And life is always better if you resolve feelings. So that was helpful for me.
Yeah, they were. I mean, God, Geddy, they were saying, your uncles were saying things to you like, you got to cut your hair, you got to get it together, like on your father's grave.
Yeah.
It really caught me off
You're
guard.
killing your mother.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't mean to laugh.
Nice of you to point that out.
I can understand it. There's a lot to process there, you know?
There's a lot to process, yeah.
You mentioned you'd love to give, you were doing your mom's accent there just a little while ago. And for people who don't know, that's the origin of your name. Your name is not Geddy Lee.
Yeah.
Can you tell that story a little bit?
Sure. Well, when the immigrants came to this country after the war, they barely spoke English. And in their culture, when a child is born, they're given a Yiddish name, a Jewish name. So and also to honor those that have passed, you're usually named after a relative. Mm-hmm. So when I was born, I was given the name Gershon Eliezer Weinrib, which was, my father's last name. And what they would do is they would, kind of translate it to the approximate anglicized name. So Gershon became Gary. Mm. And, of course, the story I tell in the book is funny because my middle name of Eliezer became Lorne, or so my mother told me at the time, that it was Lorne. So I went through my earliest life with two names, my Hebrew name, my Jewish name, or for lack of a better descriptor. People get those mixed up. Mm-hmm. But and my anglicized name. And it wasn't until I wanted to join the union, and I wanted a copy of my birth certificate. That when it arrived, I saw that on the birth certificate it said Geddy Lee Weinrib. I said to my mom, "Huh? What the fuck? What's going on here?" Lee, it says Lee, but on all my report cards and all my information, it says Lorne.
Yeah.
And she said, "Oh, yeah. Well, now I remember. Yes, Lee. You were Lee. No, your cousin was Lorne. I said, what? So it's kind of shocking to the system to know, never mind the identity issue,
Yeah.
to know that your mother didn't remember what she had named you is
Right.
kind of a shocking occurrence.
And Gary, in your mother's accent,
Yeah.
became
Became Geddy because she spoke with a very thick accent, especially when I was young. And I had one friend in particular who overheard that and thought, why is she calling you Geddy? I
Right.
said, she's not calling me Geddy. She's calling me Geddy. It just sounds like it. So he started calling me Geddy. And the rest is history.
What are you when you go through passport control? Are you Geddy?
I legally changed my name to Geddy when I was about 20 or 21 or something like that.
So you're Geddy Lee.
I'm Geddy Lee Weinrib. That's my
Oh, okay.
legit name.
Because I could see like a big Rush fan in the passport control going like, "What name is this? This is not. That's not Geddy."
No, I'm Geddy because what happened was as I became more successful and everybody in my family just got used to me calling me Geddy. My mother legit called me Geddy. Geddy. She didn't even pretend that I was still Gary. So I just decided, okay, that's who I am now.
Let me go back to the thing. There's something you said that caught me off guard. You were like, you were describing your parents' experience in the Holocaust, and you were saying, you need to understand my mother's story in the Holocaust to understand who I am. And one of the reasons you gave is that, my decision to become a musician comes from their lived experience. But I would think it would go the other way. Like when you without being in Rush, quit high school. Like you're not quitting high school because your band is so successful you have to go on the road and become Geddy Lee of Rush.
It's like this. If my father had not passed away,
Yeah.
I would have had a stricter authoritarian figure in the house.
Right.
And he may have put a stop to me wanting to do all that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of multifaceted in the sense that there was suddenly a lack of authoritarian figure in my house. And there was also something to run away from. The stories and my dad's passing left my house a house of grief. It was not a happy house. And as I explain in the book, the whole duties of a young, Jewish boy after they lose a parent is to, go to the synagogue, in the morning before school, and in the evening, for 3 services a day, you have to go and say what they call the mourner's Kaddish. Mm-hmm. And I did that for 11 months and 1 day, which is the tradition. And in that whole time, I really didn't, I wasn't encouraged to listen to music. I was taken out of music classes at school because that's part of the grief process. And so there's a blank year for me, a year where I was not hip to the latest tracks and I felt like I was left behind. So here I am now sitting there without a dad, so no male figure to, slap me into common sense.
Yeah, right.
And
no one to say get it together.
And a very sad household.
Yeah.
And seeing the world pass me by, I felt like the world was passing me by. So I wanted it. I wanted to get into that world. So I started connecting with friends and I started learning and buying records and listening to every record I could afford to buy, scraping, pennies together and buying music. And I got obsessed with music. And that's when I went and begged my mother to loan me $10 so I could buy the acoustic guitar from the guy next door and started figuring out how to play For Your Love by the Yardbirds. And so all those things kind of drove me out of the house. And that's what I was kind of getting at.
Right. I understand that now. And then that literally leads you to starting to play gigs with the band. And I will say, I've said that ever since I interviewed you last time, a lot of people have asked me what you're like. A lot of people will say, you met Geddy Lee, man. What's he like? It's always that guy.
He's a dick.
Oh, you were there. No, I usually say, I've never met anyone who loves a gig more than Geddy Lee. Like that guy loves gigs more than anything, and I loves telling stories about gigs and playing gigs. And I can tell from this book in those early days with Alex Lifeson, who ended up being in Rush, and John Rutsey, who was the drummer for Rush at the time.
Yeah.
Those early days gigging were really happy for you.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, they're always happy when you're looking back, right?
Yeah.
The most fun I had writing this book was the war stories. I don't mean the actual war.
No, of course, yeah.
But the tour stories, shall
Yeah.
we say, or the Northern Ontario bar circuit stories.
Yeah.
Those are so much fun to remember, and it became like a detective game with myself, like where I was looking for clues to spark my memory. And as you know, I'm a hoarder of sorts.
Yeah, I know that.
We justify it by saying we're collectors, but
Yeah.
really we're hoarders. And I kept all kinds of stuff. I kept photos. I kept, some of them are in the book. You can see like photos of us after a bar gig, and we're getting wasted. Alex, John, and myself, and a couple of guys from the crew, and we're getting stupid.
Before you got kicked out of the band, by the way.
That's right.
I didn't know that until I read the book.
Yeah.
I didn't know that Hadrian, is that the name of the band?
Yeah, they became Hadrian without me.
They kicked you out,
They kicked me out.
and well, it worked out well for them.
Yeah, they lasted 2 gigs.
And then I should say the Rush of the time is not the Rush that you might be immediately familiar with. Just take a listen to this. That's Working Man from Rush's first album. Hold on, in the looking back on the Rush albums process you did, how did that one do okay? Did that one do all right?
Good. Yeah. No, I like that song.
It's a
Always
good
have, yeah.
blues rock song. It's not
Yeah.
the Rush that I'm used to.
And it's the one song that we played consistently for the entirety of our career in concert.
Yeah.
I don't think there was a single. I could be wrong. There was a fan who's going to call your show and say, "Hey, Geddy was wrong about that, man. I saw them in 2001. They didn't play." But I think we play.
I met that guy, by the way.
I live with that guy. It's in a sense, it's the quintessential early Rush song. So I'm glad you chose that one.
Yeah, I love that song. So, and it leads me to the big changes that come after that record comes out. Neil Peart joins the band. I love the story. Can you tell it? I love the story of just something clicking. And Neil comes in. You guys are doing an audition for the new drummer of Rush. John has left the band. You write like, we've never had to do an audition before. We've never had to hold auditions before. And this dude just walks in. Can you tell the story?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so it was July 28th, 1974. And we had an album deal. And we had a tour that was starting in 2 weeks, but we didn't have a drummer.
Oh, good.
So it was like, oops, something missing here. So we had to have these auditions, and it was, absolutely a humiliating experience for both the person holding the audition and the poor people that are coming to the audition. So I think we had like 4 guys scheduled. Sadly, I don't even remember the first guy. But the second guy was someone that had played with us when John had gotten sick and done a couple gigs, so he was a natural person to try out. And then the third was this lanky dude that showed up in a Ford Pinto, and he pulled up to the loading dock of this place in Pickering where we were rehearsing. And he had short hair, and he wasn't wearing a shirt, and it was a hot day, and his drums were in garbage bags. And
I love that detail, by the way, that the drums were in garbage bags.
And so he comes in and introduces himself, and he's very animated, and, he's tall.
Yeah.
And he sets up his drums, and he's got these 2 18-inch, I think it was a Rogers kit, 2 18-inch bass drums, which I've never seen bass drums that small. And once he gets the kit tuned up, he sits on the throne, and he starts playing triplets. And, oh my effing Lord, it was like machine guns. I had this shit-eating grin on my face, and I was like looking at Al, and Al was getting a bit miffed at me because I was getting too excited too quickly, and I had promised him that I wouldn't make any decisions until we both talked about everybody afterwards.
A poker face. You were supposed to have a poker face.
I was supposed to have a poker face, but how can you have a poker face when Neil Peart is playing drums for you?
Yeah.
So we jammed through a few songs, and I just knew there's no way I was letting this guy out of my sight. There's just no way. Afterwards, we sat on the floor. We talked about, things we liked. We liked the same books, Tolkien, and we liked the same records. And Alex was the whole time pouting. He didn't, he was very and it's not like Al, because Al is the funniest person on the planet Earth. Yeah. He wasn't saying much, but he was just mad at me. And so we said goodbye to him, and eventually he left, and someone else came in. And this poor guy, he had written charts out for our first album, and
this is the next guy.
The next guy.
Yeah.
He set up this nice drum kit, and he was playing everything along very politely. And Al looked over at me, and he said, "Okay, yeah, I understand why you got excited about the last guy." And that was it. I knew this guy had to be in the band.
And he ends up bringing so much more to the band than just drums. Like just I mean, just take a listen to this. Geddy, what is the name of the song?
Baitor and the Snow Dog.
But a very significant song in the Rush story, right?
Yeah, of course, because it was sort of our first venture into the world of sci-fi. And I mean, the song is a joke. It was an inside joke.
Yeah, they're two real dogs, right?
Yeah, they were our manager's dogs that our road manager, Howard Hearns Ungerleider, had invented these nicknames for. One was Baitor and the other was the Snow Dog. But Neil took that and he wrote this phantasmagorical story about this interstellar battle for good and evil. Baitor being the bass, the growly, dark bass, and the Snow Dog being Alex's, virginal, pure heart. So it set us into a completely different mode of writing. All of a sudden we were trying to be cinematic. We were trying to do a soundscape that you could see, not just hear. And we, Terry Brown, who was our producer for that record, really encouraged that kind of thinking and really looked at the stereo spectrum as colors and palette, a palette, and described music in a visual way, which is something that had never dawned on us, So it was a really important song, and he was a real mentor to that way of thinking for us.
But and you write about this in the book, weren't people going, hey, the way to make money and be a successful band is to play blues rock. It's to play what we could now call classic rock. It's not to play in 7/8. It's not to write songs about mythical creatures. I mean, obviously you did it, but I was blown away in the book by how young you were and how inexperienced you were and how unsuccessful you were to be able to still go to labels and go to these people and go, no, we're going to do our thing.
Well, we had a deal based on our first record.
Right.
And I don't think they were pleased with our second record. Because,
they signed a blues band.
They thought we were going to be the second coming of Bad Company or BTO or something like that, and here is a song about space dogs. And then a very quiet song based on a Tolkien-esque place called Rivendell.
I can see it now. I can see them coming in and going, good news, we got the record. Bad news, there's a song about space dogs.
Who doesn't love a song about space dogs? Come on. So, it was more and less than they bargained for, I think. And the next couple of records, and Aggressive Steel, of course, was even weirder. Yeah. And so we were very, we were getting a lot of pressure to straighten up and fly right,
But you were uncompromising, Geddy.
We just couldn't help it, We were smoking good dope, and we had ideas that we couldn't keep a lid on. And, even though we knew we might be working our way down the ladder of success, we had to do it anyway.
I told you before we got the interview going, I said, I'm going to play you a clip from, I'm going to play you a clip from a concert, and you got to tell me which concert it is.
Yeah, this is called Test the Old Man.
Test the Old Man. This is our new series.
New segment on Q. Test the Old Musician.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yep.
The Old Man Knows?
The Old Man Knows. Scotland.
No.
No?
Rio.
Ah, okay.
Rio.
Much later.
You know why?
I should remember that the first time that ever happened was at the Apollo in Scotland.
Was the first time everyone sang along like that?
Yeah. And it gave me shivers just now. It gave me shivers then. But that's why I went to Scotland, because we played that song, and all the Scottish fans lit their lighters or their joints, whatever they had, and sang along full on at the Apollo in Glasgow.
I hear that's a meaningful moment for musicians. I hear like that moment you hear your song sung back at you is nothing like it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah, it just gives you chills. And what was even more interesting about Brazilian fans was the fact that when we played YYZ, they wrote their own parts. I mean, they were singing this soccer chant.
Like, oh.
Well, yeah, but they were singing with that, but they had this other part, and we didn't recognize it. And it was like, are they making up their own parts now? And we were playing in a really large stadium. It was like 50,000 people there. And it was washing throughout the stadium, this alternate melody. And somebody told me later that's kind of what they chant at soccer games. But it was a brilliant moment, really a brilliant moment.
I feel like it was an important moment, that show in Rio, for the band, right? For you and Alex and Neil.
It was from really a lot of perspectives, because not only, and Neil actually said it, and I write this in the book, but when we were hustled into a van to get out of the stadium after the show in Rio, I mean, it was an amazing feeling, because there were so many people. It was such a respected stadium. The soccer stadium in Rio is like a godly place for that culture. And this was really part of the first tour back for Neil after a really terrible few years and some profound losses.
Yeah, in his family.
In his life.
Yeah.
So he had come so far, and, we had done things we said we were never too interested in doing. We were, playing shows in other countries that we said we wouldn't go to. We were just doing everything differently. And we were in the van, and he said, you know what? I think we're an international band. And we all kind of cheered to that. And that was the moment I realized that he was fully back in the fold, that he had come home to Al and I.
I love the way you write about Neil. I'm sensitive to talk to you about it, Geddy, because I can tell, and even you've said it to me a couple of times, that you've had to do a lot of work on Neil's passing. Mm-hmm. I love the way you write about him in the book, and love the way you write about that time. When Neil gets diagnosed with brain cancer, how does that change yours and his relationship? Or what does that do to your relationship?
Well, it came at a time that I was still getting over the end of the band. Neil had retired. He hadn't retired from Rush. He had retired from music.
Yeah.
And I wasn't ready for that to happen. So I had some resentment. I had some feelings that were unresolved. Alex did as well. And we had just started to communicate again, because even though the band was over, we had unfinished business. We had this video to edit, this film concert footage from our last, tour. And I remember watching it and listening to the drum solo, as I had every night for over 40 odd years, and I was just amazed. And so even though we had a bit of a stiff relationship at that moment, because he had left to be with his new family, as he should have been,
Yeah.
as he had earned the right.
Yeah.
And so I wrote him a note and I said, man, I just listened to the drum solo. It's so effing awesome. And he just opened up to me. He just wrote this, effusive note. I mean, he's not a man to write short notes. So he wrote me this long email and he talked about how frustrated he was that no one was making any comments about his drum solo all through the tour. We hadn't said in rehearsal that he'd worked so hard to build this drum solo and we didn't say anything.
He still needed that a little bit from you guys.
I guess he did,
Yeah.
but who knew?
Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah.
So, and I remember on many occasions complimenting him. And besides, I sat there every single night listening to his drum solo. I mean, I wasn't in the dressing room checking box scores. I assure you, I was listening to his drum solo. Yeah, so that kind of started to break the ice. And he wrote about how happy he was and how he was a librarian at his daughter's school. And I said to myself, what kind of an idiot would begrudge this man that feeling, that obligation, fulfilling that obligation of being a father to his daughter, enjoying his new family. So it was a kind of an awakening for me, and I felt like I had just been too selfish and not enough of a friend. And it was right at that time that I had gone to England with my wife, and of course, we were sitting in a restaurant, and we got an Anyway, we got an email from Neil saying that, he was ill.
Yeah.
And it was devastating. It was just, really hard to swallow, but that's the way it was. And so in a second, any feelings of regret or judgment about his retirement, it just melted away by the time I'd finished the end of the email, which was very short, I just stated what was happening to him. All those feelings had changed. I realized, okay, there's a bigger problem now.
Yeah, and I love this guy,
Yeah.
and he's, that really highlights it. Yeah. I love that he goes back in those moments. What a gift to be able to do that. He goes back and he listens to the records. Isn't that, what do you make of that?
It shocked me, really, and Alex too, because I remember one visit we had to L.A. when he was ill, and he was sitting there telling us, we would go to his Bubba Cave for lunch, and get his favorite takeout food, and spend an hour or two making him laugh as best we could. And so he was telling us he was on the ways back and forth to the cave every day. He went every day to the Bubba Cave. That was his fortress of solitude. And he said his friend Juan, who was driving him, would play him a different Rush album on the way in every day. And he was analyzing them all, and he couldn't wait to talk to us about them. And his feelings and his thoughts and his pride. And it was shocking because it was out of character that he would look back like that. But when you think about it, he knew he was at the end of his life, and he wanted to review the work he had done.
That's powerful stuff, man.
Yeah, and to share with us his pride.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to get at, is that he wanted to share his pride with us. Let us know that he was proud.
That he was proud of the work that you guys had done together. Mm-hmm. That's a gift, Geddy. I mean, not everyone gets to have that with their friend,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure.
How was the, I know this isn't easy to talk about, and I'm grateful for you to talk about it, and you can let me know.
It's okay.
Yeah, let me know, too.
I'm back.
Yeah. How was the experience of writing about his death in the book? Because it was something that I hadn't heard you talk about a lot.
No, I didn't want to really, after he passed away, he wanted to keep it quiet.
Yeah.
So we kept it quiet. That was his wish. And that was difficult because, things leak out. People would hear something, and then they would call you, and they would ask you about, how's Neil? Is he okay? And you would just lie. You would just change the subject or make a joke or, oh, yeah, he's fine. Yeah, no problem. So that was a burden. And after he passed, and they released, a press release about it, it was hard to break out of the silent mode that we had been in for 3.5 years. And I didn't feel right to talk about it. I felt like I would be betraying him in some way if I spoke about these intimate moments. And when I wrote the book, I was very careful to choose moments that I think he would approve of me sharing and that showed him in the light he deserved to be shown.
I know what you mean when you say that every loss, and when you lose your dad when you're 12, and your mom has gone through such incredible loss, I know that from my own experience, that losing Neil, you start to process. I know what you mean now when you say that. You start to process all of those losses together at once.
Yeah. And there have been a lot.
How are you doing with it? You doing all right now?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm
Yeah.
good. The writing was very helpful to me, and but it's enough now. It's enough of the past. You can get lost in your own past. That's not good for your brain. It's not good for your sense of yourself. You can spend too long telling war stories, telling tour stories, elevating your opinion to such a height that everything you do seems important. That's a dangerous thing for anybody's personality. I don't advise you lingering on that.
Yeah.
But so I'm ready to look ahead and do things, interesting things.
Yeah. I hope when you listen back to those records, in the process of writing this book, man, I hope the general, even though you were nitpicking and what was that bass tone and what the hell is that song about and why did we write a song about two snow dogs? I hope the overarching feeling was pride of what you and your band did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't have regrets in that regard. I was the luckiest, as Lou Gehrig said, I was the luckiest man on the face of the earth. I had two of the best partners anyone could ever want in life to work with and be friends with. So I was blessed in that regard. And I don't regret any of it. And we made some great songs together. We made some profoundly bad music. And we did some pretty good shows. So that's good for me.
And you wrote a great book here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're gonna play a song we play a song after every interview.
Okay.
Do you want to pick it? What Rush song does Geddy Lee think we should play in the CBC after going through the whole catalog?
Headlong Flight.
Headlong Flight? Why?
Because it's kind of about, in its own way, it's a memoir about us and life and, wanting to live it all again.
Geddy Lee, thanks for coming in.
My pleasure. Always happy to be here.